Welcome to the final part of In the Footsteps of Isabella Bird. Now then, I hope you've been following it all the way through, so you know all the different characters that I've been mentioning, and you can link each one together with all the bits and pieces that I've been talking about, and so on and so forth. I know it's hard to follow these things, but well worth the effort. Get your mental landscape populated with all sorts of wondrous ideas and connections and parallels that enable you to read the environment that you're in just a little bit more subtly. It's always more fun to actually go to a place and then look around and you say, that's where such and such a thing happened, and this is where there's a little story about that. It's a bit like how the Aborigines used to map out their world, in a open desert where there wasn't, where nobody wrote things down. There was a few markings on rocks and what have you, but how they learnt their environment was that they told stories about this rock, that rock, the other rock, and so on. That's the great serpent, that's the great, and over there, and there was a great fight, and remember where there was the blood of so-and-so had turned into the red rock of that. That's where you can find those really juicy lizards that we really like to fry up and so on and so forth. It was the way of educating people, and the way of making them read the landscape and understand it in a poetic fashion, but also in a very practical fashion. History enables you to do that, but not just poetically, not just practically, but spiritually as well. It grounds you in your environment. It makes you realize that basically you're this ape on this planet of apes, and that you're in a movie. Oh no, that's just me going crazy. Screenwriter. You see, I write movies and TV series and what have you, and I get involved in fantasy worlds. But this is not just a fantasy world, this is history. In fact, a lot of history is fantasy. Academic historians are always trying to get to their truth, and it's always just a little bit out of the way. We're always making up stories. We're always adding in little things about the motivation of people. I have this thing about Isabella Bird and strong, hairy men. She doesn't ever say in her book that she's getting it on with any of these guys, but there's just little hints of something furtive rustling in the jungle. She's always there's always some secretive, jungly things going on when she starts talking about the wild beasts in the forest, and her going off on little trips with people like Robert Sandiland Froud Walker. With a name like that, he must, yes, Well, perhaps that's just my fantasy. It's fantasy about her fantasy. But I'm certain that was, right. Let's move on here to the final instalment, and the final instalment I've entitled "A Rough Oblong Box and No One to Be Sorry." Now you may be wondering, what on earth is that about? I'll tell you in a minute, you see, because Isabella Bird is in Taiping, and now she wants to go off on a journey to, she's in Kuala Kangsar. She's just visited Hilo and had dinner with the apes and such like, and now she's travelling around, wanted to see what's going on, and she goes off to Kota Lama. Now, Kota Lama is a little bit of an alarming place. This is where Maharaja Leila has his family and his supporters. This is an area that earlier on, when James Burch was actually the British resident of Perak, when he turned up there to stop them from interfering with the passage of people along the river, and to inform them that there was new tax regulations and so on and so forth. He was unceremoniously kicked out of the place by the locals there, and there was a little bit of a an argy-bargy that alerted him to the dangers that he was facing. And then, of course, well, he ignored them, and you know what happened to him. At least you would if you saw the earlier episodes. Anyway, he gets speared. That's basically it, And Maharaja Leila's, well, he was hung high and dry by the British, and now his widow lurked in Kota Lama. And Isabella Burch decides to go and visit, and she has tea there. And they must have looked upon her and her escort. I'm not quite sure who was escorting her on this, but it was probably Robert Sandilands Froud Walker, because only he would have thought it was safe to go there, because, tough old character, and they would have gone a couple of Sikhs with them. But Hugh Lowe, when he found out that they'd gone and visited these places, he thought they would have gone crazy. He thought that they'd done something really stupid, because it was very dangerous. These people were still not happy about the environment that they found themselves in now, especially since their main man had got hung. Anyway, she goes there, and she doesn't have much to say about them other than that they're a little edgy about it, and Hugh Lowe was a bit angry at them for risking it going there. But if you go there now, Kota Lama is quite a pleasant little village on the side of the river, and there's a little plaque there about what's his name now? I'll tell you in a minute. Major Hawkins. That's who. And we're going to get onto Major Hawkins because Captain Speedy, once all hell had let loose and Burch had been assassinated and Maharaja Leila had retreated up the river to Kota Lama. Yes, Kota Lama. Captain Speedy had been ordered to go and arrest the guy, go get them. Now, Captain Speedy, he knew this area, he knew the people, and he was on relatively good terms with all of these people. And so when he turns up with his troop of people, he takes Captain Hawkins. It is Captain Hawkins, Major Hawkins. Sorry, takes Major Hawkins and his team up there, and he talks to the people there, and they say, "No, nobody's here. We got no weapons here. And he's inclined to believe them, and so Major Hawkins, of course, they say, "Oh, we've got to search this area." Oh well, and so they begin to look, and at that point, out of nowhere come all of Maharaja Leila's men carrying spears, and they spear Major Hawkins. And in fact, they do a lot of damage with others. They chase him around, and of course, it's a real firefight. And Major Hawkins is speared and lying on the ground. He says this very British thing: "Save yourself. You can do me no good now." Sort of terribly stiff upper lipped. So he was died for his country or died for a pint. It's very hard to imagine what he was doing. But he's saying save himself. He's saying that to the sepoys and the Gurkhas. Notice that he's saying, "Don't risk your life for me." They had an interesting close relationship with these men. Did the British officers? They kind of wanted to look after them. And so this is one of those things where the British had a certain amount of ambiguity with regard to Captain Speedy. Whose side was he on? Did he lead them into this ambush? Did he? No. He was just too lax because he lived amongst these people. Well, you've heard me tell that story a few times before, I'm sure. Anyway, old Major Hawkins, right, where can you find his grave now? You can find it on Bukit Chandon in Kuala Kangsar. You can go there. It's a British graveyard, a British army graveyard there, literally a white man's graveyard. And you can find him and 16 other British officers and probably other ratings, but no Sikhs or Gurkhas, I'm afraid. They didn't get the same honours when they got buried. And you find that Major Hawkins, on his gravestone, is promoted to Brigadier Hawkins. Very often they promoted them posthumously, and it gave a little bit of an extra bit of pension to the widows and so on and so forth. But, that was Major Hawkins. Bukit Chandon, go and have a look at that and take a check of this white man's graveyard. Right, I'm reading these last sections because this is quite complicated, and I want to get these quotes out to you. But anyway, after a visit to Kota Lama, she's invited to attend a funeral, and of course, when was the last time you got invited to a total stranger's funeral? Right, yeah. Well, somebody had to go along, and apparently this young guy had come along to Kuala Kangsar. A young Englishman had turned up there looking for work. He had no other appointments or anything. Nobody knew who he was really. He turned up there and then went on a drunken bender, got into a fight with a bunch of Sikhs, and was then subdued and taken to the police station, whereupon he died. Now then, it's said that he was extremely violent. It was alcohol and drugs and whatever. Who knows? The story is all smacks of someone getting into a fight with the local police and then finding himself rather the worse for it, and then cover up. Oh, he died in custody he choked on his own vomit or something like that. And one does wonder who these people are. They turn up from nowhere on a chance, on a whim, to one of the most dangerous places in the world at that time, looking for work, and goes into drugs and gambling and spending crazily. It's all sorts of things are wrong with the situation. Anyway, the expat community come out to say their farewells, say a little bit of something over the grave, and it's oh, that's right. It said he died of a violent fever. Yes. So they're covering their bases here. They're saying it could be malaria, could be that drove him nuts, could be. Well, it's but it was the alcoholism. Well, see, even I've been in Malaysia for a long time now, so and yes, the fact that it's very hard to get alcohol here, or very expensive anyway, does reduce your amount that you drink. I mean, most people don't drink here at all, which kind of makes you crave for it. Well, these guys just went crazy when they got hold of it. Of course, there was this other alcohol called Iraq, but that didn't count, And in fact, you find the Sultans drank Iraq, but it didn't count. That wasn't alcohol, no. And and the Prophet did not forbid alcohol. He just said, drink a lot less of it. And he only referred to wine, despite the fact that Persian poetry, Islamic poetry, is full of wine and peach-bottomed boys. Oh, something quite strange about the erotic writings of Persian poets and Persian Islamic culture. It's not exactly. It wasn't exactly the Taliban. Oh, perhaps it was, because some of the Taliban were dealing with the dancing boy syndrome. Oh, well, who knows? Anyway, controversial material. I'm sure that's what that is. But here we have a not uncommon story of drunken expat life getting themselves into severe trouble and dying. And as Isabella sums it up, a career of dissipation, death at 21, a rough oblong box, and no one to be sorry. Well, there you go. That sums up all too many experiences out here. Anyway, so if the mystique dough doesn't get you, it's the heats or the Chinese or the Malays or the booze. And I'm pretty certain that since this is an era before penicillin, the women. So being abstemious in these circumstances was, well, it would lengthen your life somewhat, but on the other hand, as Isabella Bird said, you have to have the moral constitution, an iron moral constitution, to avoid being dragged down into this cesspit of intrigue and alcohol and murder, and just out of sheer boredom, you have nothing else to do. In fact, if you read some of the books about the life of planters out here in the 1950s, let alone the 1930s and so on, it's all, periods of boredom and then visits to the brothels and then getting your living maid, so to speak. And that seems, it's an image of the expat life that still persists to this day, that we're all hanging around beach bars and getting drunk and having affairs with dusky maidens in grass skirts and such like. Yes, that's what I came for. However, I went to Hong Kong, and there isn't that sort of. There's business, and it's action, and it's movement, and it's creativity, and it's the world opening up as China builds its new empire, and the entire world economy moves to the east. Its emphasis has come back out here again. This is the powerhouse that is now driving everything that's taking place in the world now. Now this, and you're a part of it, and it affects your mind, and it tells you how to survive, and it prepares you for the future, because that's where the future is. Everything has moved from Europe and the Atlantic to the Pacific and the East, and such a lot of things are going on here. If you don't understand, if you don't get on board with this, you're going to kind of just fade into irrelevance. And since Charlie Watts had just died, the drummer of the Rolling Stones, my generation fading into irrelevance, suddenly, that very thought starts to come. I can remember when, I'm digressing here, I can remember when Frank Sinatra died, and my parents going, he must be getting old. And, it's like, I don't know, the soundtrack of their early years after the war was Frank Sinatra, and the idea of that sort of an American dream of they'd moved to London and they'd got a nice police flat there, and it was in a beautiful part of London, in Canterbury. You can't afford to live there now, and it was a world that was beginning to open up, because there was all these bomb sites around and markets that were selling all the goods that were collected from the bombed out factories and whatever. There was a lot of cheap goods going around, and building was going on. And of course there was a lot of skullduggery going on, because that's why my father was given the job as policeman there, because they were recruiting more police to cover all that. But it was, the future was coming, and it was, I don't know, a Frank Sinatra, Las Vegas kind of future that formed into, well, what they consider to be rather yobbish sort of stuff coming out of Liverpool and rock and roll and what's the name? Kitchener's posters on people's walls, and the Union Jack T-shirts, and a general irreverence about the Empire and Britain, and making fun of all that. It was carry on up the Khyber. All those people were all old-fashioned fuddy-duddies. I was hunting tigers in my pajamas. Why were those tigers in my pajamas? I do not know. It was jokes about those guys. And that's my parents were rather in admiration of, in awe of in many respects, but they were moving forward to this cool version of it after the war. I don't know. It's curious kind of things were going on. Oh well, that's right. Talked about irrelevancies. There you are. I'm talking about irrelevancies. So we're back to the mosquitoes not getting us. And so it's so she approved of Hugh Lowe, though. She had this ambiguity about the whole place and the violence and so on. But she thought, oh well, Hugh Lowe, he's the guy. He's into fair play and justice, and he's particularly training up the local Rajas so that they could administer their country in a modern fashion, in a civilized fashion, where laws were fair and justly administered. It was a vision of a reforming empire. That's what she was enamoured with. Whether Hugh Lowe actually was all about that is another matter. Certainly Emily Innes thought he was a flaky character. I have mentioned this before, I'm sure. And she complained about the residents just acting like the sultans. They were unsupervised and they behaved like the sultans that they were supposed to be an improvement upon. So she didn't think much of the whole setup there. She thought it should be annexed and people should be, I don't know, it should have huge amounts of white immigration to change the culture fundamentally, just like Australia and New Zealand changed. That's how she thought the whole place would be improved upon. But that was not going to be. So it's the indirect rule. That brings, yes, it does make me wonder whether the British idea of indirect rule, though, didn't ossify sort of a version of Oriental despotism that didn't really exist beforehand, that they feared was there, Oriental despotism, and then they thought, oh well, that's the local culture, and then they built up the local sultans they dressed them in a certain way, and they wanted to their rituals to be done in a certain way. They wanted their palaces and their mosques and religion to be done in a certain way. They had a vision of Oriental despotism that they wanted to cure them of and tone it down, but keep some of it there. Just as in Britain we have the royal family, we have our medieval side which has been tamed, but we need it for historical purposes and cultural identity and all that sort of thing. This is what they were thinking, and one does suspect that it's this indirect rule really, and lack of not interfering in cultural things actually just stopped things developing in a natural way, and we're still seeing the results of that. That lack of movement that would have been natural. There would have been a turnover of things. Things would have evolved. One only has to look at Japan and the way they resolved to suddenly get in tune with the modern world. They knew it was out there. All these places, they knew. They read books. They met people. They did sort of look out and wonder how they would handle it if it came to them and forced itself upon them. And the Japanese, they could see it was sink or swim at a certain point. They'd seen what happened to other people and said, we've got to do it, and we've got to do it in our own way, though. But we've got to do it quick. And they did. But they never quite did it quick enough, because then they went crazy. They thought they would become an imperial force just like the West, but they do it from the East, and they understood the Chinese mind, they understood the Eastern mind, and they created a brief empire that everybody hates them for. Did them a lot of bad PR, to say the least, because they couldn't help but feeling that it was an empire built upon conquest, and those conquered, had to just get with the program and do as they were told. Didn't end well for anybody, frankly. It's still something that haunts the the political environment in this area. Or I love Japan. I go to Japan quite frequently, and it's a really pleasant place. And the Japanese are great people, and they were always classified as the English of the East, and I think that's not entirely untrue. There's an awful lot of Japanese culture is very familiar. When you get to look at it, it seems familiar. There are some things that are quite different, but one begins to see how the British could have said, they're like the British of the East, whereas the Chinese are like the Irish, just a lot more of them. They like to dig things. Irish navvies, Chinese miners. That was the way they would classify people in those days and see in the world. But it's doing it their way. Ultimately, after a period of American occupation, they did the switch, and we can see South Korea similarly managing to really come to the fore. That's an interesting place, very powerful cultural place. Its soft power is really something that's has grabbed the imagination of a lot of people around the region and possibly elsewhere. I don't know. I mean, I watch endless Korean soap operas. But where am I now? Yes, as you can see, we're getting to the end of the journey here. But the Indirect rule, Hugh Lowe, who she considered to be a good guy, used to say, "Poor fellows, they know no better." That's what he said of the locals. And yes, this is the woke sort of gambit, isn't it? They know no better. Yes, they can be changed. No, they can't. But we know no better. And we can say about these guys, they knew no better. When they were looking at all this, they knew no better. We do this all the time. It's very hard to get around either being patronising and patronisingly sympathetic, or antagonistically sympathetic, or just not sympathetic at all. Some cultures, as I say, some aspects of many cultures could just do with dying out. As Shakespeare would put it, much honoured in the breach, is what he said about the British habit of getting blind drunk and having huge what are they celebrations where everybody gets blind drunk and feasts, that's the word I was looking for. The old Anglo-Saxons kind of went in for that, and it did carry on, and it's still there. We do like a good bender now and again. We can't help it. We know no better. So, right, what else then? Oh, a final trip, yes. Now, she did go horse riding, one suspects with Robert Sunderland, Frau Walker, and she went off to, of all places, Bucketton. Now, Bucketton is where Jaffir Long is buried. Now, if you remember Jaffir Long, no, you don't. Of course you don't. He's the father of our man, Na Ibrahim. And there's a little shrine up there, and there's also some Islamic schools that were set up in that area. What are they called? Podok establishments. Podok, is that the word? Once again, I'm obviously getting adult in my old age. I can't remember half these things. But there were various little schools there that were set up, and it was part of the revival of Islam that was taking place throughout the region, and it's always being revived in some form or other. So there was a number of scholarly gentlemen went there and set up schools, and so it was an area of sacred groves, let's say. And you can go there. It's quite a pleasant place, and she found it absolutely beautiful. She did actually come across a couple of British officers who were on furlough, and they were just walking around the country. And apparently, she said, they would go up or the only word that they knew is to say is makan, 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 and that's what they'd turn up a place and bump into people, and they'd announce who they were, and then they'd say makan, and the guy goes up the road there and point them to some place where the Chinese would be serving, and they'd say, how much, very loudly, money, how much, and Chinese would think, a lot more than I'm going to charge my friend over there, I can assure you that. Anyway, they were apparently just walking around and touring, and she just thought it was marvellous that people could just walk around now, and it was safe to do so, and Pax Britannica was working at last. Now, here you are in this beautiful place. And then the first thing that she did when she was returning and leaving the place, she had to go via Taiping again. She got back to Taiping, and then she went to the police station there just to check up to see if they'd actually found the people who had murdered that British tax collector and chopped him up and thrown him in the into one of the sewers, I do believe. That wasn't so long ago, and in fact, that area now is actually considered a little bit dodgy because there's been stories of hitchhikers and hikers just disappearing mysteriously. Perhaps the spirits got them, and people still believe in these things. It's a bit like Bucketton, where people believe that ghosts lurk, and it's a bit mysterious, and you should watch out. Well, that area was also is also still considered to be a little bit, edgy. Don't walk around there late at night. It's dangerous. Well, for her, it was a beautiful place and free of conflict. Because of the British? No. I think her ideas in these matters are always somewhat. She's trying desperately to say something positive after saying so many negative things. When it comes down to it, she's always trying to find the positive, but it always comes down to so-and-so just got killed, and we've got another murder up there at Rodeo, and it wasn't so long ago when everybody was at each other's throat. It is this sort of area. Anyway, she finishes that journey, and like I say, we're coming to the end. I'm turning over here because I'm moving to the final words. Now then, the virtues and the vices that she discovered in 1879 in the Malay Peninsula, one can still find them today. Perhaps we are never rid of them. Perhaps they will always be there. Perhaps they will always be part of our political makeup wherever we go. And perhaps the emphasis moves a little bit to one side and a little bit to the other. One of the main vices I detect in the history of Malaya is that your politics has to do with getting, as a method of gaining wealth. People gain political power so that they can accumulate wealth, maybe for themselves and of course for their followers. And one can say the same all around the world. But perhaps that's always the case. Perhaps the reality is always that, if we're going to be really cynical. But we do pay lip service for the idea of service to the community. And we do have politicians in Britain who, well, if you take a look at the way they don't live very particularly well. They live in a council house somewhere and so on, and they don't do the deals. They don't do the backhanders. They don't become directors and advisors of various companies, or at least not whilst they're in power. Afterwards, they go to town, they get on the talk shows, they go on, they get hired to go and talk at business conventions for huge amounts of money, where funds are being raised for massive projects that are going to transform our environments. The Hyperloop, or rocket ships, or just general development of the what's now the developing world. It used to be called the third world. Now it's the developing world. Awful lots of pure scams are involved in that, and one of the ways to give your scam a great deal of credibility is to invite some of these people who are on the world stage, who they never coined it in whilst they were on the world stage. They kind of kept that, well, perhaps it was their children that coined it. Yeah. You see, it's always there, and Malaysian politics perhaps it wears it a little higher up on their sleeve. Najib Razak said, "Cash is king," and Dr. Mahathir was rather alarmed about that. He thought, well, well, he behaved like cash is king as well, but he thought we should emphasise some other aspect of here. We are trying to sort of rule a country, not simply create a series of clients for which we obtain money to hand out to. Anyway, one should not get into talking about these things aloud, because there's so many people who with various other ideas about that, and there's probably be greater experts on this matter elsewhere. But here, it seems to be a moment where, as I say it, looking at the history, I kind of see the continuity, and then the final words are coming. This is what she said. "We sailed from Penang in glorious sunshine at the early hour this afternoon, and have exchanged the sparkling calms of the Malacca Straits for the indolent roll of the Bay of Bengal. The steamer's head points northwest. In the far distance, the hills of the peninsula lie like mists upon a reddening sky. My tropic dream is fading, and the golden Chersonese is already a memory." There you go, her tropic dream. Well, her tropic dream was probably not found there, or perhaps it was. Sanderland, Froud, Walker. Yes, who knows? But my tropic dream is also going to be fading into the distance too, because I'm leaving Malaya. This is one of the reasons why I've been doing this, is because we just haven't got the time to make a proper documentary where I wouldn't be rambling on quite so much. I would be scripted and to the point, and I would be out there, and I would make sure my voice wasn't squeaky or croaking or something like that. I would be, what's the word? Hydrated in all sorts of ways. So I'm leaving Malaya after 6 years of rather surprising interest in the country. I didn't come to Malaya to be in Malaya. I actually came here to do a TV series in Singapore, and because of visa restrictions on living there, I moved here to Johor, Bahru, across the border, and here I then, discovered that everybody in the TV world that I was involved with was retiring. And thus I realised that I too was retiring, rather surprisingly. So we decided we'd make some documentaries ourselves here. And I was going to make a piece of drama, an independent movie, but filming in Malaysia is rather hard because of the heat, and I'd also made a low-budget feature film in Hong Kong, and that nearly killed me, I have to say. I'm still shell-shocked from that, PTSD from that, and I was thinking, do I really want to put myself through that? Because when it comes down to it, unless it's a brilliant movie with real deep, significant meaning, other than a piece of fun, with semi-amateur cameramen or actors or people working for nothing, that sort of put together. I just don't want to be doing that again at this advanced stage with this sort of heat and the lack of control over one's environment that low budgets gives you. I mean, we would have need to cut block off streets and all that whilst we crashed cars and things like that. I had a plan to do that. I could, I know how to do this stuff low budget and make it look pretty good. But we would have had to block streets off, and I didn't know the police understand how they worked here, and the licensing agreements, and I was thinking, oh God, I'm going to get involved in all that sort of stuff again. Much easier to go off and do these little documentaries about the history of the place, because the history of the place is something that made us interested in it. It enabled us to meet other people and talk to them, and suddenly they were interested, and they thought, oh, you're doing this, and you're giving information about this, and we found out all sorts of things, how to live here, and how many surprising little nooks and crannies of exciting creativity were at work underneath it all, behind the hidden veil, so to speak. There's a lot going on here, which is of great interest, and one hopes it's going to carry on in that fashion and not be buried under another deluge of something or other. Well, who knows? Who knows what the future has? But all I can say is read your history books, look at the history of these places, look at what other people are saying, look at things going on, because what can happen is contained in those contemplations rather than a fantasy of what should happen. We've all got to get in touch with the I Ching, or the will of heaven, or whatever it is that you want to think of. It gives you a buzz in the brain in some fashion or other. So I'm going to say farewell now. I will be switching off for a while, because I've been popping these things out very rapidly, because now I'm packing up everything, because we're leaving in a couple of weeks' time, and that's going to be traumatic, and we're going to be in quarantine. It screws the mind up. But I'm sure I'll do some more about Frank Swettenham. He's someone that I think I should do another one of these things, just give a talk about him, if nothing else. So look forward to that, and also look forward to our channel changing its emphasis from travels in Malaysia to rediscovering Great Britain. And I'm hoping that we're going to rediscover it. I don't know whether we're going to be looking at history or local history, or just the political landscape as we find it when we go there. The political and social and cultural landscape of Great Britain, because we haven't lived there for 30 years. I know it's changed radically, so it's a foreign country to me, and I think there may be another bit of YouTubing that one can do. I'll also be turning my mind to cranking up a few of my TV shows that I've got in mind, or maybe a theatre play. But no, I've got a few things going around. See where that leads me. Whether I can be bothered or not, because once again I have discovered that I've reached a certain age, which has alarmed me considerably. I didn't actually think I ever would. I thought I'd be, 26 forever. But one isn't. See the beard, the grey hair. But I don't look too bad. Let's take a look. Close look. I don't look too bad. Yes, we all think that. And then. Yes. Okay, I'm moving into that kind of fantasy world, and I have to look at the history. Remember, focus. Look at the history, see what can happen, what can, not what should, not what you hope, but what can, and prepare well, and enjoy the ride. Find what makes it an enjoyable ride. There you are, there's a word of wisdom. Probably the only one in the past 22 hours or so, but there you go. And I must stop saying that, but yeah, there you go. Bye.